tools all about data visualization, data storytelling, going from data to dashboard with various tools. And yeah, I have a dedicated show. I've got a podcast. I'm writing a book. I have 2 kids. I like to run. I can spend, the whole hour or so talking about myself, but I'll stop there.
So this is like a celebrity moment for me. This, Kate, you are like a data celebrity. I don't know if that's a thing, but we're gonna coin that as a thing today.
Awesome, thank you. Yes.
So I wanted to start. So this topic is one that we see a lot at QuantHub. We help organizations go down that sort of data maturity path around data literacy across the enterprise. And one of the things that we see a lot is that we see a lot of intimidation. And because we're not talking about data for analytics professionals, we're really talking about data for everyone. And there's that intimidation factor that is preventing people from, feeling like they have a role in that, in using data and creating data and so on. And so just kind of stepping back in even in your career, how did you get involved with data and how did you overcome, some of that intimidation that's just kind of natural in every one of us?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll share a story. So it was 2014 and I was expecting my first child, and it was a pivot moment in my career because at that point I was focused more on consulting, regulatory compliance, risk management in the banking area, which is very far from data analytics work that I started doing after that. But it was 2014 and I was sort of looking for any role that would keep me working from home so I could actually see the child that I was about to have. And it pushed me into looking outside of what I normally work on, because that career involved me traveling, being on site at the client site. This is way pre-COVID, right? So not everybody was working from home at that time. And so I sort of raised my hand for this new position that opened up, which was a data analytics and insight strategy manager. I had no clue what that meant. I knew I didn't really know what data analytics was, but I was willing to learn. And I think that's, I had a personal reason why I had to overcome that factor of intimidation and fear that really helped me push me towards that position. But that was my first sort of introduction to working with data. I was given a data set and I was given a tool, and the manager at the time was like, give me some insights. And I'm like, yeah, that. Coming right up, sir. I'll be right back. And then I'm like, what am I doing? There's all this data. What is an insight? What do they actually care about? So that was
Right.
sort of a story of my love story of falling in love with data.
And so where did you even start? I mean, that's a daunting task if you're not comfortable with data and somebody says, give me some insights from this set of data. How did you even start that?
Yeah, I started by looking at the spreadsheet. The data set was sitting in a spreadsheet. So I started by just reading the column headers and familiarizing myself with it as if it was a book with the table of contents or something. So I'm like, okay, this row is titled that, or this column is titled X. And now what's in that column? I would sort of take a little look at what the data had. And that was the first step in, getting comfortable with what does the data even have within that database, that spreadsheet, is just glancing at it, which is something I think people are afraid of. I know it's silly to say, like, how can you be afraid of a spreadsheet? But I think people inherently don't want to feel stupid and confused. And sometimes when you've never seen something and you're
Yeah.
opening it and you're like, oh, I don't understand this. And people don't like that feeling. I think if you could push slightly past that, you'll notice that it really isn't all that complicated. So where I started was just looking through that spreadsheet and then having conversations with the key stakeholders for whom I was creating the data visualizations and dashboards, and just getting a sense of, what do you do day to day? What do you care about? And sort of trying to piece the two together of what they're telling me versus what data I have to work with.
Right. So it sounds like you were starting small, just trying to figure out just nuggets of insights rather than the boil the ocean sort of approach.
Yes. Once you start trying to boil the ocean, that's when the fear takes over and you're like, I can't do this. Goodbye. I'm just going to live
Yeah.
on the streets now.
So you didn't immediately dig into data science books and start trying to learn programming languages and do that?
No, though I did order quite a few books. I ordered, Data Science for Business. I signed up for courses on Udemy, on Udacity, Coursera, Data Science Toolkit. I watched YouTube videos because I wanted to make sure that I secured that position so I can stay working from home. And that was
Yeah.
really my main goal. So I kind of did lose my mind a little bit and think I want to learn programming, started learning R and Python at some point just for fun, because that's what people do for fun. But early on, no, it was just focused on, data visualization, data analysis, and really getting the right insights to the stakeholders.
Yeah. Did you have or do you have a design background or kind of a visual design background?
I do not actually have a design background. And interestingly, when I started working in my first data analytics job, I put together a data visualization that will make most people on here sort of see their lunch again. Like, it did not look good. And I didn't know it didn't look good because I didn't know what good looked like, right? So I got feedback on it and people told me, maybe clean this up a little bit, even though at that time I didn't really know exactly what that meant. The extent of my creative design background would probably be working in PowerPoint and designing slides for clients as part of my consulting job. Because consultants, we create a lot of slides. We think
Yeah.
in slides, we
Yeah.
talk in slides, and I don't do that as much anymore. But back then, if you wanted to present something, it had to be visually appealing. So I think that skill also translated into taking, those extra steps to clean things up and make them visually appealing.
So let me get this straight. So you've now become a data celebrity and do a lot of work in data visualization with no design background.
Right, no design background, but I think
Right.
it's you start to learn as you go, because the more good data visualizations that you end up seeing, the more your eyes sort of adjust to knowing what good looks like, and then you strive to design, basically copying the experts is what I'm trying to
Right,
say.
right. Selective. It's selective plagiarism, right? It's not
Yes,
actually. It's not bad plagiarism. It's like positive.
yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, and so I think that's just such an important point that you don't have a design background. You didn't necessarily have a super technical background, but now your whole life, your whole work life revolves around data.
Yep,
And so
yep.
you've sort of made it there, and you didn't have that background, and you're very successful in this area. So I think it's just important for people to see that as an example. And how do you feel like one of the things, if you look at the sort of demographics of the field of data, there's not equal representation from different aspects of society, and particularly women. You don't see as many women in data type of positions. And why do you think that is? Do you think that has something to do with this intimidation?
It could be related to the intimidation factor. I think it also might go down to when kids played together and sort of the toys that their parents would buy for them. A lot of times, the boys would get more of the sciencey, the techie, the STEM toys, where the girls would get like Barbies and, I don't know, cookware to play with, or here's a little mini ironing set. Go have fun, right? So I think
Right,
it all
right.
starts at the beginning. But for me personally, I never saw that as a factor of intimidation. Probably because I worked in finance, risk management, and banking, and I not too many women there either, right? So I think I was okay with that. I never felt sort of pushed out because, oh, you're a woman, what do you know? I've never felt that. But I think one thing that is important, and it's something that I strive to put out there in the community, is the sort of see her, be her movement, where, for the women out there who want to see more women in the data science field, become that woman that other people can see. And
Absolutely.
that happened to me early on. I think it was probably still in college, where I attended an event. It wasn't in data analytics at the time, it was risk management focused. But I attended an event where it was largely dominated by male speakers at this conference, which was normal, right? Even today, you'll see, 90% of the speakers
Yeah.
out there tend to be men. But I saw this like really powerful woman come on stage, give her talk. I don't even remember her name, but she gave this talk and she just looked so confident up there that it made me, someone sitting in the audience, think, oh, wow, I could do this. Like, if she could do this, I could do this. So I tried to put more women into speaking roles, especially with my conference, where,
Yeah.
if it's not at least 50% women, then I feel like I've not done my job correctly, because I do want to put that balance out there without calling it something like women in data.
Yeah.
I have special feelings and thoughts on that whole concept, but let's
Yeah.
let's move
Well,
on
and,
from that.
people need to see themselves in role models, right? To feel like it's something that's achievable. Just like you're saying you did. It all of a sudden gave you a sense of confidence that, yeah, why can't I do that? And it almost goes back to a little bit of just what you were saying as your journey overall. It's you start seeing elements of success and doing things in small pieces and seeing little wins, and all of a sudden you feel like you can do it again, and that intimidation, and the data is not scary, is just
Yeah.
look for small wins, or look for people that are doing it that can help you get some confidence along the way, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you think about the skills needed in the modern workforce, we always hear that data is certainly one of those skills. And where do you think data kind of stacks up against other skills in the sort of workforce of the future, if you will?
I think it ranks pretty high up there these days. I think there's just about any role that can benefit with having some sort of data skills. And I think, especially if you take a role that you don't expect an individual to have these data skills, and you bring them in, and then now they have the capability to maybe analyze sort of either customer flow or some sort of data that impacts the business. I think it can definitely help people stand out. But even outside of the workforce, just being data literate or data fluent is just so important to your daily life, right? Just being able to understand your own health metrics, your own, like I analyze my running data, right? It can be as simple as that. Some people analyze the food they eat and they look at that kind of data. And I think there's only pluses if you're on that journey of becoming a data professional.
Right. Yeah. You're buying a car, you're buying a house. I mean, there's just data. It's
Everywhere.
everywhere around you that you can use to make better decisions and to live your life differently. And it's for sure not just a skill at work.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
yeah, it's absolutely all around us. Do you think people are, one of the things that we've seen in, we're a relatively early stage company, 3.5 years in, and we sell mostly to enterprises, so pretty large companies.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we're seeing evolve, but it's not quite there yet, is that do the individuals across an entire company, are they all thinking, yes, I need data skills?
Hmm.
And I mean, like salespeople, marketing people, HR, operations. And, so on average, are people aware that they need to be investing in building these skills? What do you see?
I personally think that there's a big push to getting data literacy skills within most organizations. I do think in some cases they're not being pushed out in the right way. So a lot of times there's a course that is being thrown out to everybody in an organization, and it's sort of like, okay, everyone, take this course. We're all going to get data literate this week. Let's do it. And
Right,
it's
right.
really, you're laughing because it doesn't work that way, because
Yeah, it
people
doesn't
within
really
an
work that way.
organization, yeah, they're at all different levels of, let's say, data literacy or data fluency, and we sort of need to target their skill set and bring them up a level from wherever they are currently sitting. And
Absolutely.
that's something that I think would help organizations actually go on this data literacy journey versus the blanket approach that I'm seeing in most organizations now.
Yeah, I think, and that's not just true of, and certainly we see that a lot. We're in the learning field, and a lot of rollouts of learning solutions in general are very much one size fits all. Or maybe there's some initial assessment that's usually based on survey responses, like, do you know data? Well, most people aren't very good at assessing their own skill,
Yeah.
and so it's ends up being a one size fits all, sort of a one time thing. Meaning, I'm like you said, I'm going to learn it this week, and then forever forward, I'm good, which is not exactly how learning tends to work. We all know this from school, right? You in school, you like learn, test, forget.
Yes, yes, exactly. That's
And
exactly it.
so that whole one-time learning thing is just doesn't quite work that way.
Yeah, and a lot of times I think it also results in this intimidation factor because sometimes the courses that are brought in are super technical and you lose at least half your audience because they start
Absolutely, yeah.
questioning, well, why do I need to learn about p-values, right? How does that help me do my job? So again, it goes back to really targeting what the audience actually needs to know from a data literacy perspective. And I guess making that point again of don't use that one size fits all approach because it doesn't. It just doesn't.
Yeah. So when you think about people across the enterprise, one of the analogy that we tend to use is because the entire enterprise, all of the people aren't quite yet aware that they need to be building and investing in their own data skills in roles like sales and operations and so on. We sort of liken it to, we kind of are working with the managers, and the managers are like parents trying to get their kids to eat their vegetables. The kids need to eat the vegetables. They may not understand why quite yet, or they may not be totally bought in, but eventually maybe they'll like their vegetables and they will actually reap the benefits of having eaten their vegetables.
Yeah.
And so, are you seeing that when in these organizations, when you see people rolling out data literacy, are they just kind of dumping out a training course to people, or are they working through managers, or are you seeing success or failures from different approaches, or what are you seeing?
I'm seeing mostly failures. And, to use the analogy of the kids and their vegetables, I think a better approach would be sometimes you can mash the vegetables up with like meat or something else that your kids or pasta that they like to eat and sort of
Yeah,
spoon feed them a little carefully there or put some sauce on it. But in the end, I think it's mostly the individuals that have to learn the importance of why are they learning these skills and how those skills are actually going to help them in their own career. And I think that's a journey that organizations still have to go on in terms of understanding the benefits and explaining those benefits to their staff, their whole organizations. So then those people, those individuals are sort of raising their hand and saying, more carrots, more broccoli over here, please,
right,
and asking
right.
for more skills. But I guess right now that's not the case. Right now, what I am seeing is companies buy some sort of subscription to a course provider, or they buy some courses. They send everyone a login without even asking them if this is a course that they're interested in or if they see the value in. And there's either telling them, here, this is free. It's open for you if you want it, which most people are going to say, oh, it's free. It's always there. I'll do it later, which means I'll do it
Yeah,
never. In other cases, they'll say, I'm forcing you. Here is what you have to do. And again, forced activities tend to just be something that the person will probably log in because they have to. They'll click through it as fast as they can. I'm guilty of having done that with some of the mandatory training courses, and
yeah. It's
I'm sure if everyone here can raise their hand somehow or let us know they've been in that situation where they either start a new job and then they're like, here are the 5 courses you have to complete. You're
yeah,
like, okay, let's click through and see if I could pass the test at the end, because
yeah, yeah.
it's seen as something that's forced and not something that's um, going to benefit me in the future. So I think it's that communicating that this is actually going to help you in the future is
Yeah.
important.
When it's like small wins, right? It's just like what you were talking about earlier when you started getting into it, and you start seeing little nuggets, you start seeing that you could use that, and then it starts the flywheel, right? A little bit.
Yeah.
It starts kind of feeding itself, and that's something we believe in strongly. Is doing things in small pieces. It's more digestible, and you start seeing some value out of it rather than doing a lot of long form work. It's just it takes forever to see the value, and it's over your head half of it, and the rest of it is less than what you need to know. So it just tends to be a mess. So when
Well,
you think, oh, go ahead.
oh yeah, I was just going to ask, like, what have you seen as, something that's super successful for organizations in terms of getting people to really want to take part in some of these trainings?
Well, I think the context, I mean, I couldn't agree more on setting context as to why you should care.
Hmm.
That's critical. And so we've seen in rollouts with organizations where they really are doing a good job of setting that context, that you get initial adoption. I think one of the problems with learning solutions is, just like you said, if you just send people licenses, they never go in at all.
Yeah.
And so they never even realize that it could be good or what they might get out of it because they never even start. And once they're out of sight, they're out of mind, and so they never go in. And so setting that initial context, I think, is important. And I do think having maybe KPIs across the organization of, we're trying to build a more data-driven enterprise, and so having KPIs around activity and skill growth, actually, if like we measure skills, and so we want data skill growth to be a data-driven exercise. So we measure skill growth, and so I think that's important, is to look for those types of metrics. But at the end of the day, people. There's a lot of friction in most learning solutions, like even some of the ones that you talked about early on when you were getting into data that you use. Those things are, if you go search data skills on any of these platforms, good Lord, it's hundreds and hundreds of courses, most of which are 4+ hours in length. And so talking about intimidation, it's overwhelming. And so, everything we do is 10 to 15 minutes, and it's meant to be like a daily, just like you learn, in the flow of work every day. And so we've seen that type of rollout and that type of approach be successful. That's the way the language learning solutions work. They're all like 10 to 15 minutes a day, micro learning, and those are very effective. And so, we model what we do after that, and have seen better success than sort of industry averages from that type of approach.
Yeah, I think the 10 to 15-minute approach is so interesting, and it actually sounds like fun, right? If you sign up for a 4-hour course, you're like, okay, how do I put this into my schedule? What am I going to give up? Right. Versus 10, 15 minutes, I can do this while I drink my coffee or something, or have my tea or whatever you're into. It just makes it so much more digestible. I think that would definitely help in motivating people to actually do something, telling them it's only going to take 10 minutes of your time.
Yeah, I mean, people need to feel success in what they're doing, and doing it in small pieces helps you get momentum. And that's a key to adopting almost anything, is feeling some sense of momentum.
Yes.
And so everyone go ahead and hit enter if you did actually respond to the question from earlier of where have you seen examples of intimidation and using data. So if you typed up your answer, go ahead and enter that now, and we can talk about some of those examples. But Kate, one of the things I wanted to ask you about also is, when you think about the different types of data skills that are important, you focus a lot on data visualization, of course, but where does that fit in amongst sort of other data skills that are important, whether it's at work, like we were talking about earlier, or even in your day-to-day life of just, being in and around data?
Yeah, I think it always depends on what you actually want to do with those data skills. For me personally, I tend to focus more on the data visualization, data storytelling aspects of that entire spectrum, because I think I enjoy being creative. I enjoy designing, even though I don't have that actual design background like we mentioned up front. But I think there are different people out there, some who are completely put off by any design materials, and they don't want anything to do with it. They never want to have to choose which chart to display or which colors to use, or sort of where do we put everything. And for those individuals, there are plenty of other data skills that are extremely, extremely necessary, right? There's knowing statistics, understanding data, the algorithms, putting together machine learning algorithms that provide the right output, fine-tuning those, working with data engineers, for example, making sure all those data pipelines fit together so that the data is ready for data analysts to go ahead and analyze and visualize. Programming, there's just so many different skills out there that you kind of have to sit back and think to yourself, what do I actually enjoy working on, and what do I want to take more steps into learning more about, so I can become really good at that. And like you mentioned, for me, it was data visualization, data storytelling, but as I said earlier, I was not very good at that aspect of it at first. I just knew I liked it, but it took me several tries, and it really pushed me to start even Googling different images of like, what does a good dashboard look like, and sort of just scanning that and taking a look at what makes this look better than that. And funny story is, when I started putting some of those best practices in place, my manager at the time, he looked at that same dashboard that I put in front of him before with these visual best practices tweaks. And he's like, Kate, I don't know what it is you're doing and what it is you're changing, but it's looking so much better. Like he couldn't tell exactly what I changed, but he knew it just
Yeah.
looked better. You can't really put your finger on it. So that was very motivating. And I'm like, yeah, there are these small little tricks that we can take, little steps that we can make to make things look better.
I found the same. My background is in kind of product and tech, so product development, and I find the same thing when I'm working with designers. I'm not a designer by trade, but when I
Yeah.
see something, I have an emotional reaction, or I have a reaction to it of how well it's done or not well, and I can't articulate exactly the design concepts that are good or bad, but I know that I like this one better than that one, and as a user and that and that type of thing. And initially, actually, back to intimidation, it intimidated me a little bit in giving feedback that I don't really know the concepts, so I don't know if this is good or not good. But then
Hmm.
over time, I just got comfortable that I'm a user,
Yeah.
and I can think about how I would use this and
Right.
how it comes off the page to me or the screen to me, and that feedback is. That is valuable. One of the things that McCall said in the chat, and then we also have a question, is, and this is, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one, of one aspect of being intimidated in try to read data and look at visualizations is when there's too much information
Yeah.
on a dashboard or in a spreadsheet, and being a little overwhelmed and trying to figure out like what metrics are in there, what matters the most. How do what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that people have this fear of too much data, whereas there's probably another group of people that always want more data, right? They're focused on how do we collect as many data points as possible. And I think the way we tackle that is I'll start with the dashboard, I guess. When you're looking at a dashboard, if it was designed appropriately, it will have only the components that are relevant in the view to begin with. But if not, I think it makes sense to sort of read the dashboard the same way that you would read an infographic or a book with pictures on it, and sort of read all the titles first. And that, for the most part, should give you a sense of what it is you're looking at. I think it does get a little bit more confusing when when it's interactive and you can sort of click on things and drill down. And I think taking it piece by piece is probably my best advice for digesting data analytics within a dashboard, within a data visualization, and sort of making sure you understand part A before you move on to part B, and then trying to make a connection of how those two work together. For the spreadsheet or database part of the question, I think, again, reading through sort of the headers or what data points do you actually have, getting an understanding of what's within all of those columns is step one. But also speaking to, like, for example, if you're looking at this data so you can analyze and visualize it, speaking to the stakeholders and asking them, what do you actually care about? Because
Yeah.
when I was doing data analysis, we were working with Salesforce data. And if anyone's worked with Salesforce data, you'll know that there are a lot of fields in there. Some fields are mandatory, some fields are useless, and some fields are there. You have no idea why, but they all have data in them. And when I exported one of my first Salesforce reports, it had hundreds of columns of data, right? Tens of thousands of rows and hundreds of columns. And I'm like,
Right.
this is overwhelming. This is crazy. And what I realized after talking to some stakeholders was we only care about 5 columns. The rest is garbage. Don't even look at that. And I
Right.
think being able to raise your hand right away and saying what matters, what doesn't matter, can save you a lot of time down the line of, don't analyze column X if no one cares about that data at all.
Yeah, and so I think a sort of a part of that is, talking to the stakeholders is really understanding like what is the context. So you have all this data and all of these different data points and trends that you could pull from it, or even all these metrics that might be in a dashboard. But if you don't start by understanding the sort of business problem and things from the stakeholders, then you could just overanalyze yourself the whole problem to death and not actually ever look at what matters the most. And so to me, jumping into just reading a dashboard and looking at a data set without asking some of those questions is just an immediate way to be overwhelmed.
Yes, yes. I forget who told me this story, but there was a really interesting story of a really smart data scientist that joined an organization. I think it was some sort of game, like a video game organization. And, he spent all this time, weeks, I guess, if not months, analyzing their data. And he came out with an output that said, this character that you have in there is able to do X, Y, and Z. And, this is not in line with the other characters. And that was his main output. And they're like, yeah, that's the whole point of the game. That's supposed to happen. They're like, what are you talking about? You spent all this time, data scientists aren't cheap. So
Right.
it goes to show you have to keep talking to the stakeholders and ask them what it is they care about and getting that context.
Yeah. So one question, this is from Christine. What do you think about integrating data visualization to assist students to learn about what interests them?
So integrating data visualization into a student's curriculum, or I guess I need
Well, I
more.
think it's actually basically using data visualizations as a tool to help students realize the areas they may want to go into.
Yeah, I mean, I think that could be interesting. I personally didn't come across too many data visualizations back when I was in school, not even in college. And I think that's in part because it wasn't as a hot topic as it is now.
Yeah.
But I think data visualization tends to help with just so many things. And if it's something that can help students figure out what it is that they like doing, then yeah, by any means, go for it.
Well, and I think actually even the more broad category of data storytelling,
Yeah.
of when you present something, present it as a story, integrate different components of data. And right now, my son is a sophomore in college. My daughter is she's a senior in high school, and so we're touring colleges now for the second time. And oftentimes when we go to presentations on campus visits, some of them do a good job of this, and some of them just throw data at you. When they tell a story, you get an emotional connection that includes data, but they tell a story about what it's like to be on that campus, what it's like to be a part of that alumni network, what it's like, speaking of data points, to have a higher average salary than other universities. Like, there are data points that they all share, but when they weave it into a story about what life is like there, and then actually integrate those data points in there and some of those visualizations, that's when it's most effective.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If they share a story, then it's a lot more powerful. They can say a student who was just like you, who joined our university and went on to make 10%, 20% more than their peers, is extremely powerful. But to your point on data visualization in schools, I attended a new student orientation for my kids 3 weeks ago maybe, and they had a data visualization up. It was neon green on a light neon background with it was just so confusing. I took a picture of it and I'm like, I can't really post it, but I'm like, oh my God, they need help. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think anyone understood what they were really looking at. It was just this neon green bar chart. I don't even remember the data points. I just remember it looking really bad. But yeah, in addition to data stories, just getting the visual right already is a big help.
That visual alone sounds intimidating. It's like burning my retina, just the thought of it.
Yes.
Hey, one question from Ina is, what approach would you recommend to people who think they are data literate or fluent, but actually are not?
So, I actually thought that a lot more people were data literate than they are. So just give you an example. Somebody called me recently, and I won't name names, but she's like, I'm taking a statistics exam right now. Can you help me? I'm like, okay. I was running at the time. I'm like, sure. What's the question, right? So it's sending me pictures of, I didn't get this. It's a table. I'll take the time and explain it. It's a table that has like 5 columns, A, B, C, D, E, and then like 6 rows. Okay. And the question, it was just about like how many Netflix ratings do you get for, how many were rated G, how many were rated R, and so forth. And she told me she's doing statistics, but really all the question was asking was, in 2018, which is row here, what is the number of,
Right.
ratings that were rated R for this, for that year? So I'm like, well, it's pretty simple. You just take this number divided by that number and you get the percentage. And she's like, wait, what number? Why am I using this number? And it was something so basic that to me, I thought every single person in the world knows this. But it was sort of a realization where I'm like, wow, not everybody knows how to do this. That, something that I thought was as simple as 1 + 1. For them, it was statistics. And it was like, a big course on doing something like this.
Right.
So I guess, I mean, I understand I sort of swerved away from the question of how do you tell somebody that, or somebody who thinks they're data literate, but they're really not, is, maybe put that question in front of them and see if they can answer it. So some sort of quick assessment that you can take that can tell you if you're data literate or not. I think a lot of people walking around might have a different definition of what data literacy is, and to them it might mean something else. So, to them, if they can, read a quick chart, a bar chart, and know that column A is higher than column B, to them, they might think they're data literate. But I think it's a little bit more than that. And I think taking a quick assessment is probably a good way to sort of get a pulse check on it.
Yeah, certainly. I would agree with the assessment approach. That's partly what we do, and that we're always measuring skill and not just. There are a lot of data literacy solutions out there that start with questionnaires, and again, people to this point aren't quite aware of their skills, and that's okay. It's just kind of human nature. So start with an assessments that aren't intimidating. These aren't designed to measure like job performance, hire fire type things. Some of these are just to give you a place to start. But I think that's why back to meeting people where they are in learning is so important, because everyone's at a different stage, and learning is only effective when it meets you where you are. It's just overwhelming when it's meeting you way beyond where you are, or it's boring if it's meeting you below where you are. And so in either case, you're not getting anything out of it. And so I think that's just so important in learning. So I know we're just coming up on time. Christine asked a question about using lean methods to focus on what's important, and whether lean methods are possible in data analysis to create solutions. And do you have thoughts on that?
I was gonna say, let's define lean methods. I just want to make sure I'm on the same page. How do you interpret lean methods, Matt?
Well, I mean, to me, maybe one thought on that is, I like that type of thinking, and it's a matter of what we said earlier, of like just kind of get started and start doing it in small pieces. And so an initial part of data analysis is some of the exploration, right? And this is after you understand the problem and some of the other things that we were talking about earlier. But look for small insights, and so don't try to actually do the full end product from the beginning. Like, just start playing a little bit, right? And so I do think that's part of lean, because lean is very focused on doing iterations, right? It's like true iterations, not iterations and increments are different, right? Iterations being, I'm actually going to, if I'm doing a painting, I'm going to sketch, and then I'm going to start darkening areas and make a more permanent thing. Then I'm going to color, and that's an iteration. Whereas if I draw the arm, then I draw a leg, and then I draw another leg, right? So if you iterate, you start by doing some just kind of general exploration. And so I do think that's absolutely critical in doing that type of project.
I highly, highly agree, because I've gone down two paths with this in my prior client work. And I started with, getting, let's say, a problem set, and then getting some data, and I know what I need to analyze. So I put together this full-blown dashboard, invest weeks into it, and then say, here it is, and they're like, yeah, this is not what we wanted. And I'm like, oh, well, great, I'm going to go back and do my thing. And then I learned quickly that it sometimes is easier to just take a pen and paper or pencil and just like draw. We're going to have the title here. There's going to be a bar chart here that shows us XYZ.
That's right.
And then, after that, maybe put it in PowerPoint that's quick and easy, and then make sure everyone agrees, outlining which data points you're going to use and how you're going to do it. Then go to the tool and actually build it. So, Christine, if that's what you mean by lean methods, then yes, absolutely. The lean method will always win, because then you always come back and, talk to your stakeholders about the different iterations and bring them along on that journey to make progress.
Well, I think that goes back to how, when that person came to you and said, start finding some insights in this. Yeah. I doubt that you were thinking at the time of like, what's the end solution look like, right? Because how would you have known? Like, you don't even necessarily have that skill set yet, right? So you were starting to ask questions like, well, tell me more about what you're looking for, what decisions you're trying to make, or what's the sort of problem space that you're working in. So you just start asking questions, and then you start taking baby steps to get there. And that's the key to intimidation, is to overcoming intimidation, is just get started.
Get started in baby steps.
This paralysis that comes with trying to actually think about the very final solution from the very beginning, and people get sort of paralyzed by that thought process.
Yeah, absolutely. And then spend a lot of time maybe formatting something that ends up being shut down, at the moment you present it. So making sure that you don't spend that much time perfecting it until everyone agrees that this is exactly what they want. And then you can go into automating reports and making sure everything looks perfect and the color scheme is perfect. And those steps, at least to me, matter a lot. But those steps should take place once everybody agrees on what it is that they're looking for.
Absolutely. And I think we've all agreed here, and as we come to a close here, that neon green is the way to go in modern data visualization. So
with
particularly
a 3D pie chart,
for parents.
Floating 3D green pie chart.
There we go. Okay, two takeaways. We've got two things. Exploding 3D pie charts, preferably in some sort of neon with a neon background.
with a different color neon background that really burns your eyes. Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Just to clarify, guys, don't do this, right? If you're just listening in now, don't do that.
Yeah. Well, Kate, thanks so much. Where do people find you?
Mainly LinkedIn, Kate Strachnyi, or datacated.com is another good way to learn about what I'm doing.
Okay. Well, Kate, it's always great to talk to you, and later you're gonna have to post in the notes here of how people find that shirt, because that's the coolest shirt ever. So it's very great for an October webinar as well, and we're getting into Halloween,
guys.
so it's
Data is
perfect.
Not scary. Yes.
That's right. Well, Kate, it was good to talk to you as always. Thanks so much for joining us, and thanks everyone for joining us today.
Yes, thank you for having me. Bye.
All right, bye.